Hello everyone, I'm Karen from Close to My Heart, and we are talking cardstock today. Before we get started though, I just want to remind you to like and subscribe to our page here on YouTube, and be sure to turn on your bell notifications. That way you will always be notified when a brand new video comes up, like today's, that is full of great information and techniques. So let's take a look at what makes our cardstock different and ways that you can use it. I'm going to pull in a full piece of mulberry cardstock here and tell you a little bit about our cardstock. First of all, our cardstock has a white core. It is printed, and there are a few reasons we do that. First of all, white core cardstock, kind of rare. You can always find it with Close to My Heart, and it gives you lots of opportunities for great techniques. But another reason for that is that we like to make sure that our inks and our papers are a perfect little match. And because we print our cardstock and leave the core white, we're able to get that really great match. So you're going to see that in some of the art today that has matching ink and cardstock, so that you can see what I'm talking about there. Another thing that allows you to do are a few great techniques like tearing and sanding and a few other really fun things. And today's video is all about ways to use your cardstock. So I do have some pieces of art to show you. You can kind of see them teasing you a little bit, poking in, and then I'm going to demonstrate a few of those things to help you see a little bit about how you can use cardstock to do some of these things. So I'm going to move this full piece out of the way and start bringing in some art, and we'll even look at some of this art close up so that you can see some things that are demonstrated in the cardstock like you were looking at them in your own little hands. So this is a beautiful single page layout. We have featured several cardstocks on this layout. Probably the view you get right now, it just looks pretty. Let's go look at this close up, and I'm going to point out a few things here. All right, you can see that these pieces here back behind the photos all have patterns on them. You might even look at those and think, oh, those are pattern papers, a tone-on-tone print. You can see them over here on the side as well. No, we stamped those. All of these are stamped with the same color ink as you see the cardstock, which we call tone-on-tone stamping, which is a really great way to use cardstock. It's like getting another piece of pattern paper that's really subtle. You know how sometimes you just want a little variety. You don't want all solid, but you also don't want it to get too busy. That's a time I love to do this tone-on-tone stamping. Something else you may be noticing on this page are these little white edges. We lightly sanded each of those edges, and even over here, this piece here, and along the edges here, can you see how you see a little bit of white along that edge? Maybe if I put the black underneath it right here, it will be a little easier to see. Can you see that sanded edge? Well, you can get really aggressive and dramatic with your sanding, or you can also be a little more subtle like you're seeing here on this page. And the first thing I want to demonstrate to you is that sanding, because it's one of my favorite things to do with cardstock, and I think you're going to be amazed at all the cool things you can do with it. So let's go back over here where you can watch a little bit closer. I mean, a little further away, excuse me. And I'm going to bring in a piece of cardstock. The first thing we're going to do is just do a little sanding along the edge. Now you can get different looks with different grits of sandpaper. And this one is kind of a more coarse grit. The coarser the grit, the more it's going to rough up your paper and maybe look a little more dramatic. And the more fine the grit of the sandpaper, the more subtle it will be. Actually, I am going to pull this right over where you can see me close up. Okay, awesome. This is just a little square of mulberry cardstock. I'm going to take my sandpaper and I'm just going to kind of run it along the edge. Can you see how that's just pulling a little bit of that printed color off the top and giving me a really great look? It's almost like I took this and then put a slightly larger piece of white cardstock back behind it. So that's a really fun look. And you can see that just by kind of running your cardstock along the edge, you can get that look. Now, while we're doing that, I also want to show you what kind of a look you can get if you sand the whole piece. When I sand a whole piece, I like to make sure that my sandpaper is going the same direction the whole time. So I'm just pulling that toward me, and you can see the more I rub, the more you're getting that sanded look. And I want to show you something else that's really fun. Once you've sanded, if you want it to be even more dramatic, if you just take a tissue, run that over the top, it takes off all the dust, of course, that you just sanded off, but it also, because you've roughed up that paper pretty well, takes off some of the color of the paper, so it's even more dramatic. You can kind of see that. Now I'm just going to turn it and do this other side and not use the tissue, and you'll be able to see that there is a difference in what that looks like. So you can kind of keep that in mind as you're sanding. Do I want it to be subtle? Do I want it to be dramatic? Would I want it to look a little more roughed up like what you see here by using a coarser piece of cardstock? Or would I want it to be a little smoother with a finer grit sandpaper? So while we're looking at this, I want to pull in a couple of other pieces. One of the things that I love to do when I sand is to create my own kind of a denim look paper. So I've brought in a few of our blues that I've done that on. This is Harbor, this is Mist. And you can see how I have created something that looks like denim. And I'm going to show you how to do that with this piece of sapphire. Now that we have a few different blues to look at, you know how there's all kinds of blues in denim, right? This is our sapphire color, which is kind of more of a navy color. And I'm going to do what I showed you on that mulberry piece, where I'm just pulling it one direction. This is a coarse sandpaper, so you're really going to get more of a dramatic chambray look. But you can also do it with that same, like I was talking about earlier, a finer grit, and you'll get still a denim look, but a little more subtle. Okay, so I have gone the whole piece of cardstock one direction. Can you see that? It's all going this way. Now I'm just going to do a little quarter turn, and I'm going to go the other direction. So it looks like the fibers in denim. If you curve your hand too much as you do it, you'll get curved lines, and you'll just figure that out as you, as you practice and do this more and more. Okay, so that's what I have. Looks like a piece of denim, and let's try that trick I showed you with the tissue. I'm just going to now wipe off that extra dust, and we're going to make it even more dramatic. Isn't that a fun thing that you can do? And it only works on our white core cardstock. It doesn't work on solid milled cardstock. So that's what we've got so far. And while we're right here at the close-up camera, I'm just going to keep cleaning up as I go. I think you will enjoy seeing everything close up. The page would have been hard to see in its entirety close up, but all the rest of the art I brought is cards. And so I think we'll be able to fit that on the whole screen. Now this shows another really cool property of our cardstock. Can you see all the graduating stripes of color? These two stripes are from the same cardstock. Those two are, and so on. So I'm going to grab another piece of cardstock and show you how we did that. This is Mist. We used that here to create that denim look. And I want to show you the difference in how you can get this difference in tone. One side of our cardstock is the true color that we've developed. And by the way, we have 40 colors that are exclusive just to Close to My Heart, that are our own exclusive mixes and colors. This is Mist, and when you turn Mist over, you get the same color but a lighter tone of it. So that allows you to do this kind of gradual look. It's like getting two pieces of cardstock in one. So if I were to cut this in half, let's see, I think that's a 4-inch square. Let's just cut it at the 2-inch mark. And I can put them right next to each other right here on camera, and you can see exactly what I'm talking about. It's a perfect match. It's almost like you got the perfect shading if you were using markers or watercolors, but we did it for you in cardstock. And that gives you the ability to do cool things like what you see here with colors that coordinate so beautifully together. So that is another really great thing about cardstock, our cardstock. Now I'm going to bring in another example here. There's something you see happening on this card that also is something you can only get the same look that you see here with the white core cardstock. Can you see all this tearing? That's a really fun look. It was really in about 15 years ago, and it is back. Tearing is back. So let me just bring those two pieces back in that we just used, and I'll give you a few little tearing tips. When I tear, I like to pull toward myself. I like to hold on to the paper, the piece of paper that I'm tearing, with my thumb and forefinger, and then I use that to kind of guide the tear. I'm going to show you. I can make my tear kind of dramatic like that, or I can hold my thumb there and make it really straight, a little less jaggedy, a little more smooth and curvy. Can you see? So you can control how you want it to look, and you could stack that with different colors. You could just do that. Another cool thing you could do with it is ink it. So let's pretend we want this paper to have a green edge. I don't know why I'd really want a green edge. I maybe would want a brown edge or something if I were, oh, actually I do have a toffee pad right here. Let's use that. Let's say we were doing a layout that we wanted to feel kind of old and weathered and distressed. Sanding would be a great thing to use on that layout. So would tearing, and so would being able to age this. So I've just got a round sponge and a toffee pad. Let me show you. Toffee, oh, wrong way. Toffee is one of our kind of medium brown colors. And I'm just going to take this sponge and go right along the edge, kind of almost hold the edge tight with my fingers and flick that sponge along that white torn edge. And now we've taken that cute white edge and turned it into more of a distressed edge. This would be perfect on a heritage layout, or maybe a boy layout that you want to feel a little more grungy. So that's a great thing to do. Now, while we've got this going on, I'm just going to re-tear the other side so that you can see how fun it is to stack cardstocks of the same color, but use the front and back. You can also stack cardstocks of different colors, like what you see happening here. But I've got the mist and the light side of mist. And isn't that a fun look to have that torn white edge as well as the graduating colors of mist? Okay, so that's what you're seeing demonstrated on this darling card, the Welcome Little Princess card. Now let's bring in this card. This one you're looking at and going, what's happening with cardstock there? All I see is that cute layer of Seabrook behind that pattern paper. Haha, that is not pattern paper. That is just white cardstock that we've stamped using different stamps and colors to create our own pattern paper. So I'm going to show you a few little tips today. We are going to, I've got two different flower stamps, one that's little and one that's big. And I grabbed a big and a little to show you something that maybe you're not seeing as much here. All of these stamps are about the same size. When I am mixing stamps that are different sizes, I like to start with my larger stamp because it's going to be the one that's probably more dramatic on that paper. And this, you can see, is just random stamped. I wonder if I can get that a little closer without it going blurry. With just different colors of tiny stamps. We're going to take these two flowers, one that's larger and one that's smaller, and create a floral pattern paper using two colors. I'm going to bring in paprika and melon, which you see here in this cardstock. There's the melon cardstock, there's the paprika cardstock, and you're going to be able to see the inks that coordinate with that just here as I create my own little piece of pattern paper. Now, something that I want to show you is how to get a random pattern like this and still have it feel pretty evenly spaced. Kind of, we like to call it planned random around here. I'm just going to season my stamp by rubbing it on the palm of my hand. You could rub it on the back of your hand. Your skin just takes off that shiny finish when you get a brand new stamp so that it takes the ink better. It doesn't bead off. So we're going to ink this little flower guy in paprika, and I'm going to stamp him on my cardstock. And I want to create a triangle. Now keep in mind, I'm going to go back and add in the smaller flower in a different color. So I want to leave enough space in my triangle to add other stamps. So now that I've stamped that, I'm just going to kind of stamp myself a little triangle. 1, 2, 3. Then I'm going to continue to build triangles and also turning my stamp different directions so they're not all facing the exact same direction, and not being afraid to go off the edges of the paper, because if you were to cut a piece of paper that was a pattern paper, you would get partial images, and if you keep them all right in the middle, it's going to look exactly like you faked a piece of pattern paper. We want it to look as natural as possible. So I've got my 1, 2, 3 triangle. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, turn my stamp a little different direction, go 1, 2, 3, and I'm just going to keep going until I have completed a nice pattern on my paper that is pretty evenly spaced. So that's kind of a tricky way to get your own pattern paper. Now I could stop there. That's cute, right? I'm just going to let a few little pieces come in so it will look like I cut a piece of paper. And I'm going to go back in and use this smaller flower with a melon pad. And also you can see this ink right now is darker than that papaya, or I mean, excuse me, than this paprika. That's because it's wet. As it dries, it will get a little bit lighter and match much more closely to that cardstock. Okay, we're going to bring in our melon pad now. And I'm just going to go in between these with this little guy, like I'm creating my own cute pattern paper. And I'm really doing about the same thing as before, creating triangles as I stamp. And you can see how that's creating a really great paper that looks like it was a printed paper. I could continue to add, like maybe I have a cute stamp that's just 3 little dots that I would go in a different shade or color and add those in some of those blank places. Or maybe I'd want to take a background stamp. Maybe it's a plaid background stamp and stamp that over that whole piece so it has a nice texture behind the florals. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. And you will enjoy creating your own background paper. Now, while I've got the stamp here, I'm just going to grab a piece of melon cardstock and show you that tone-on-tone stamping that we talked about. I've got on the light side of melon here, and I'm just going to use this smaller flower that we just used with the melon pad and create my own pattern on this piece of melon. And because I'm using the light side, it's a little more dramatic. If I were to use the dark side or true color of melon, then it would be a little less dramatic, but I love a good tone-on-tone stamping. I use it in my own personal scrapbooking and card making a ton because I love the idea that I'm getting a pattern that's not overwhelming my photos or my center icon on my card, and it just enhances them without being too dramatic. Now I've got this on the light side, like I mentioned. I'm just going to finish stamping this really quick and then turn it over to the dark side and show you how it is a little more subtle when you do it on that dark side of the cardstock. Okay, so you see my pattern paper piece here. I'm just going to turn it over. This is still wet, so it's even more dramatic than it will be when it dries, which doesn't take very long, just a few minutes. Now, if I stamp here, you can see that's a little less of a contrast, and it will be even less when it dries. And I'm just going to pull these over to the side for a second and let them have a minute to dry, and we'll pull them back in just a moment. Okay, let's bring that layout back in really quickly and take a look at that tone-on-tone stamping here, and you can see exactly what I'm talking about. So here is a piece of honey butter cardstock that is stamped with honey butter ink. Seabrook cardstock, this is the light side of Seabrook, stamped with Seabrook ink. Light side of melon, stamped with melon ink. Can you see how that creates such a great effect in your artwork? Okay, I'm just going to make sure I haven't forgotten to show you any art. We've got this one that illustrated the creating your own pattern paper on white daisy cardstock. This one that showed the tearing. This one that showed the graduating colors of cardstock. And this one, like we just looked at, that showed the sanding and the stamping. And I think that you can see really how great our white core cardstock is and how many wonderful techniques can be achieved with that cardstock. Now, before we finish up, I just want to quickly bring in a few of those examples again. Hopefully this has had a minute to dry a little bit, and you can see how we created our own pattern paper. And then just a reminder on a few of these sanded pieces. And let's not forget the tearing and the inking. Aren't those fun? I hope that you enjoyed getting a few really great ideas to use with your Close to My Heart cardstock, and that you're going to go put them to use right away.